Hi there. I'm Lilia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of New Day, New Beginnings. Now, you know what? This is kind of a redo because I tried to do this a couple weeks ago, but I could only get 8 minutes. So you never got to really hear the whole story. So here I'm going to do it all over again and hope that we can get through the whole story without interruption. Now, this was a story of a young couple. Um, they could have had anything and everything that they wanted, but the problem was the husband's jealousy. And for no reason, it was his overactive, jealous mind, which made them almost lose everything. And that's a terrible thing because his wife was a dedicated wife. But if she even talked to or spoke to, let me rephrase that. If she even spoke to another man, immediately he's accusing her of flirting. And that was even with their neighbors. I mean, no matter what, she couldn't speak to a gentleman, be it a neighbor or not. Now, they had already relocated 3 times in 1 year because of his distrust in her. And then after that, he'd be threatening the men to leave his wife alone. Talk about an overactive imagination. Think about yourself. Do you have these kind of situations? I mean, no matter how much she said she loved him, he couldn't get past his own mindset of jealousy. So, the story I'm going to talk about today uh, is going to revolve around their fourth relocation within this same year. And the relocation was on a ranch outside of North Fork. Yes, it's another Western. But my title for today is Payback Doesn't Always Pay Off. And a lot of times, getting back doesn't necessarily mean getting even. So let me tell you about the story. It all began when Mark and Lucas, you know who they are, they had stopped by the ranch of the new people, the Owens, Mr. and Mrs. Owens. And they only stopped by on their way to town just to introduce themselves and be neighborly, welcome them to the area, and so forth and so on. But as they rode up, she, Mrs. Owens, Faye was her name, she was on a horse, but the horse reared up and threw her. And when Lucas drove up, he saw her on the ground and he went over to help her up to make sure she was all right. But at the same time, her husband came out the house, but he came out with a rifle in his hand. So as he's walking over to them, Lucas was saying, well, oh, hi, we just stopped by to introduce ourselves. We're your neighbors, and we just wanted to say hello. But guess what Mr. Owen said? He said, all right, you said hello. Now clear out. And she was dumbfounded. She just kind of dropped her head in total shame and embarrassment. I don't blame her. I would too. What kind of way is that? So, and even as Lucas looked at Mark and Mark looked at him, and they just turned to go back to their wagon and go on into town. But even as they were walking away, her husband is shouting out to him, and stay away from my wife. Well, first of all, he didn't know her. And she was so annoyed. She said, how could you drive the neighbors away with a gun? And she just turned and started walking into the house. So as he's walking in the house behind her, he's saying, oh, big man, that McCain, just like Andy Travis. Now, already he's reminding her of a man she spoke to in the previous town. But her response was not what he quite expected because she said, no, he's not like Andy Travis. He's like you were once. Now that told me something. And she said, a man I could look up to, a man I could respect. He was a strong man. Now he knew what she meant because he used to be like that, strong, dependable, trustworthy, someone she looked up to. But he's still he's still, oh, well, I didn't ask him here and I don't want him around. He doesn't even know the man just because he's a man. And she's trying to tell him, well, the horse reared up and threw me. And the horse only threw me because you beat her. So now I'm saying when he gets angry about something she does or doesn't do or spoke to somebody, he takes it out on the horse. So, of course, when she went to ride the horse reared up and threw her. And she said, the horse reared me up because you beat her. So she thought, I guess the woman was going to attack her too. So he was simply helping me up off the ground, she says. And his reaction is so nonsensical. He's like, well, you don't have to flirt with every man you meet. So anyway, she says, even if I just speak to a man, it doesn't matter. You're going to say I'm flirting anyway. She says, you know what? And I'm having a hard time. I can't go on living this way. Because in her mind, she's thinking, we've moved 3 times. This is our 4th location in 1 year. You're shutting me away from people because you buy a ranch that's removed from town. And now you're shutting me away from yourself with your jealous mind. Think about what we're going to talk about, your mindset. Think about yourself. What's that? What's controlling your mind? But here she's being isolated not only from town people, but he's isolating her from himself just with what his threats. So anyway, as Lucas and Mark, they go on into town and Mark says, boy, I sure can't get over that Mr. Owen. We were just being neighborly. Yeah, and Lucas is like blowing it off. Yeah. He's a strange man. So Mark went to pick up the mail and Lucas went over to talk to Micah in the sheriff's office, marshal's office. So Micah says, oh, did you meet your new neighbors yet? You're going to like them. They seem like nice people. I just saw them for a few minutes in town. But see, Lucas is already getting his own ideas. And he says, well, tell me something. He says, how well do you know this Jake Owens? But Micah already knew him previously. And he was saying, well, I know him about as well as I know you. I just haven't seen him for 4 or 5 years. Well, when I knew him, he was wearing a badge. And in Missouri, he really made a name for himself because he was the marshal there. But he gave it all up to become a cattle rancher. I'm glad he moved here. But as he's saying all this to Lucas, Lucas has that look on his face like, yeah, right. So he's looking at Lucas. He says, well, what's the matter? Because he saw by his facial expression. What's the matter? He said, you said you met him. What do you think of him? And Lucas was saying, well, maybe he's changed since you knew him. Now, at the same time, Jake and his wife had come into town to get supplies, and she went into the dress shop. Now, across the street from them was a hotel, and on the 2nd floor of that hotel, looking out the window down at them, was who? Andy Travis, the man he just mentioned to her. And he was there with a partner. So and they're looking out the window and they see Jake. And Travis says, he says, up, he's heading for the saloon. I see he still lights his liquor. But his partner said, yeah, ain't his wife the one that turns you down? Now I see where this is going. Now I see. But Travis didn't want him to bring that part up. He says, well, Jake doesn't know it. He don't think so. And I saw to that. And it's torturing him. So all that was a plan of Travis from back when they were in Missouri. He said, yeah, I got him going. He even gave up that badge just to get her out of town. But now his partners reminded him, yeah, but with that bullet he left in your leg, I'd say y'all was even. And now Travis don't want to hear about that. He says, oh, look, I'm here to satisfy your wallet, not your mouth. In other words, this guy Sims, he's not a partner. He's a hired gun. Now the picture becomes clear because he really hired him to make sure Jake Owens dies. That's his goal. So anyway, as Lucas comes out of the boot repair shop, she's coming out of the dress shop. So they're not looking. He's putting, excuse me, he's putting on his glove and she's got all these packages in her arms and they bump into each other. So the packages fall on the ground and he's picking up the packages and she's picking up. And so at the same time, of course, as you would have it, Jake's coming out of the saloon now. He done had his few drinks and he sees them in conversation. Well, he just comes, tearing across the street and he's hollering, Lucas, I told you to stay away from my wife. And she's like, Jake, you don't have any right to, oh, shut up. He says, just shut up. And he pushes her aside and he says, now look, this is your second warning, McCain. Now, you're not going to get a third. And she's like, Jake, you're making a scene. Would you just take me home? And he pushed her aside. And Lucas took the packages that he had picked up and just shoved them in his chest like, here, take them yourself. And he just shoved them in his chest. And he said to him, you call yourself a husband? And all Jake could say, well, she's my wife, McCain. And the next time we meet, it'll be with a gun in my hand. Now, just then here comes Micah. He sees all this and he comes over. He says, Jake, what's the matter with you? Lucas, what's the trouble? What's the trouble? Lucas is fuming at this point and he's like, ask him. He's your old friend. And he just stormed off and went and got in the buggy and went on back home. So he said, Lucas went on. And Jake says, how well do you know that McCain guy? And Micah said, he's a good friend of mine and he's one that can be trusted. And Jake says, well, I don't trust any man around my wife. Where my wife is concerned, I don't trust nobody. You keep him away from me and far away from my wife. And Micah is like, Jake, what is wrong with you? What happened between you and Faye? And he says, well, that's no concern of yours. So he turns to go to the wagon, but Micah follows behind him. He says, Jake, now look, I always knew you were kind of jealous of Faye, but I never thought I'd see the day you treat her the way you did today. And Jake was like, well, look, I don't want no trouble with you about McCain. And Micah said, well, you're not going to have no trouble from me. If you have any trouble, it's going to be of your own making. And Jake points to her and he says, yeah, and her, the minute my back is turned. Well, he is so full of his jealousy, it's just overtaking his mind. So they turn to ride off. They get in their, get in their buggy. They going home, but still up in the hotel room, who's watching? Travis. Now he's discussing his plan for the next move. So Travis is saying, yeah, well, I made him think he married an incurable flirt, and it's driving him crazy. It's making both their lives miserable. And he's just laughing because that's his goal, to ruin his life, because he's walking around, limping around, I'll say, with a bullet in his leg. But his friend says, well, I thought you wanted him dead. And he says, oh, I do, in time. He says, but if he keeps antagonizing, what's his name, McCain, that side buster, the rifleman they call him, he ain't going to be long for this world anyway. So, you ever notice how the minds of vengeful people, they just never stop imagining the worst for others? And a lot of times we get in situations in our own lives. It's like, yeah, I wish this and I wish that, but it doesn't pay. Now, this is how jealousy, hate, revenge, it doesn't matter. All these things take over your mind to give you negative thoughts. But as he was saying this, he's not long for this world if he keeps messing with the rifleman. Now, Jim Sims, he's saying, well, this sounds like I made this trip down here for nothing. So Travis said, look, if Owen dies, it don't make no difference to me who the executioner is. I don't care if it's you. I don't care if it's McCain. Long as he's dead, that's my goal. That was his only concern. So anyway, meanwhile, the next morning at the ranch, Mark's getting ready for school, and he's telling his father he's worried because Lucas is going out to do the fence posts, which is the borderline for their property and the Owens property. And Mark is kind of worried because he saw how unreasonable Jake had been the previous day in town. But Lucas had given him some good advice, and I thought this was very good too. And I like what he said, because Lucas told Mark, he said, look, don't worry. There's an old saying that goes, things we worry about most never come to pass. So keep that in mind and get off to school. And you know what? That's true. I can relate to that. Can you? Think about it. How many times have you worried about something? Oh my God, what am I going to do? Should I do this? Should I do that? What if this? What if that? And many times I've done that. And something happened and just made the whole thing clear up, or it just got handled a whole different way. I wasn't even involved. It's happened many times. So anyway, Lucas goes on to put up the fence post. But when he gets to the fence, he sees her sitting on her side of the fence under a tree. And he said, oh, I didn't mean to disturb you. I just came out to replace the posts. And she said, oh, you're not disturbing me. She says, I just rode out here to get away from the house for a while and have some place quiet where I could think. And he said, well, I guess I better let you leave you to your quiet. And she says, oh, no, you can stay. I don't really like being alone. But he was saying, well, sometimes that has its advantages. And it does. I learned that too. Quiet, a lot of times, has its advantages. But as they're having this conversation, Travis and Sims followed her, and they're watching them from a distance. So she says to Lucas, she said, well, actually, I did have another reason for coming here, because I wanted to apologize for the embarrassing scene that was in town yesterday. And Lucas, he blew it off. He said, well, he was just a man doing some early day drinking, because it wasn't even noon yet. And she just said, well, you're very kind. She says, you're widowed, aren't you? And he said, yes. He said, well, did you ever doubt your wife? Were you jealous? And he just said, well, I loved her. She said, and you believed her when she told you she loved you, right? And he just nodded, yeah. And she said, lucky man. Thank you, Mr. McCain. And she just left. She just went back to the house, I guess. So, meanwhile, Travis is up in the hotel room. Watching from where they went, where they were watching them. He was thinking, and he says to Sims, he says, "Well, yeah, I know. Even though that was innocent, I think I got enough to start a snowball rolling." See, his mind's already thinking, "How can I make something out of nothing?" So, and he says, and this will be the perfect place to end it. So all this is getting put in the next plot in his mind. So they leave to prepare his plan. But meanwhile, Micah rides out to Lucas Ranch and he's like, "Hey, Micah, what's up?" And Micah, first thing he says is, "What's up between you and Kay?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, is it true that you two had a meeting at your north fence this morning?" And he said, "Well, so what is it that you want me to say? You think I'm seeing his wife?" And he says, "Well, are you?" Now Lucas is getting annoyed with him and he says, "Not the way you mean." Well, Mike is like, "Well, is there any other way?" And Lucas is now getting angry. And he said, "You know there is. Faye Owens is just an unhappy woman. And no man has a right to treat her the way he does her. Jake shouldn't treat her that way." And Mike is like, "I agree. I know that. But after all, they're married, they're man and wife, and what goes on between them has to be settled between them." And then Lucas said, "Well, wait a minute. First of all, who told you about the meeting this morning?" And Micah said, "Nobody." He said, "Nobody did because I can tell the talk started in the saloon." And then Lucas cut him off right there and he says, "Well, that kind of thing, that's one thing I wouldn't listen to." And Micah said, "Well, I wouldn't do anything to add to it, Lucas." Now Lucas is annoyed, but look, I'm just sorry for her. That's all. That's all it is. Being married to a man who doesn't trust her. And Micah said, "Well, I don't know what happened to Jake. He always did have a quick temper. He was hot headed, but this jealousy thing, I just don't get it. But I'd stay away from him and far away from her." So Micah leaves, and Lucas is sitting there irritated and just pondering what a mess just because I said hello. But meanwhile, the semi drunk Jake, he's now coming home. He's out of the saloon, so they're home, and he's gone in the other room. Now he's putting on his gun and has two more drinks while he's home. And she enters the room and she's like, "Well, aren't you drinking a lot lately?" And now he's being sarcastic. "Well, maybe I got a reason to get drunk today." And she says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Oh, I heard about you and McCain." And "You heard what? There was nothing to hear." "Well, do you now deny meeting him at the North Line?" And she said, "No, I went there to apologize for your behavior yesterday." And he said, and now here he goes again with his mom. "Well, yeah, I heard a different story in town." And she's like, "I don't care what you heard." And he said, "Well, how about today? Do you feel he needs another apology today?" And he's just going on and on. So she said, "Look, this is ridiculous." So she says, "I don't want to start up with this unreasonable jealousy of yours again." "Unreasonable, unreasonable. What about Andy Travis and all those times I saw him riding away from our house?" And she said, "I keep telling you, there was nothing ever there. He was never in this house. I never even saw him on the property." "Well, I heard differently in town." He's still talking about in town. And she said, "Talk. That's all it was talk for the 100th time. Travis was a braggart." Now we get the true story. She called him a lonesome creature. He's just a lonesome creature who brags about all the women who rejected him. That's why he was talking about her. That's why. And she even said to her husband, she said, "Yeah, and you shot him for his bragging and nothing else, because there wasn't nothing going on." Your jealousy is destroying us. It's already robbed you of the most important thing in your life, your job as a lawman. That was his whole life. But he said, no, well, the most important thing in my life is you. And I intend to fight for you. But she's like, you don't have to fight for me. I'm your wife. I love you. And he grabs her and she thinks he's going to hug her. But he grabs her and he holds her by her shoulders and he glares at her and he says, yeah, Mr. McCain's waiting for a visitor at the north line. So, and he shoves her down into the chair and he says, we don't want to disappoint him, do we? And he leaves the house. Now, his intent, and she knows what it is, he wants to go face Lucas at the north line. But nobody knew that Travis and Sims were already hiding nearby, waiting for the meeting. So Travis is figuring McCain will kill Jake, and then if anything goes wrong, they'll just kill him. And no matter what, he says there'll be no loose ends. So now you see Jake riding up. He's approaching Lucas at the fence. He jumps off out the wagon and he says, I warned you, McCain, the third time to talk would be with a gun. And Lucas is saying, well, if you're coming here to talk to me about what's going on in town, you're making a big mistake. Ah, no mistake, no mistake. That kind of talk, it don't start by itself. Well, we know that. Don't we know that. But he's using that as an excuse. He said, well, you got your gun, now use it. Use it. I'm tired of these lies. Use that gun. And he draws. But of course, Lucas shot him. But he only shot him in the shoulder because he wasn't out to kill nobody. And when Travis and Sim saw that, they both took aim. But the thing he says, Travis says, well, I'll take McCain. So they both shoot. But of course, Lucas has that repeater. It repeats 4 times faster than the average rifle. And it has twice the distance. So, of course, he killed them, needless to say. But now Faye is riding up because she knew what was going to happen. And when she went to help, she ran over to Jake. And he says, well, who were those 2 men? And she said, well, I don't know, but one of them was Travis. And Jake still got the wrong mindset because he says, yeah, see, you said it was just talk in town. He even followed you out here. And she said, he must have started all those rumors just in Missouri. Now Jake is getting a clear picture. Oh, he wanted me out of the way. Then he thought you would come to him. And Lucas just shook his head. He's like, you are the biggest fool. Travis, you think he just wanted you dead? He could have had easily arranged a bushwhacking, an ambush, anything, and there would have been no witnesses. Are you so blind you can't see that he just wanted your jealousy to cause your death? You are such a fool. And now Jake's realizing, yeah, I was. But so his wife helps him back, and well, bottom line was this whole story was about 2 men blinded and driven by jealousy and payback for 2 different reasons, but one common goal. The woman. Jake already had her, but he was blinded by his jealousy. He couldn't even recognize what he had. And Travis, well, he was angry because she ignored his advances. So he thought he could spread enough lies that people would believe them, and that would be his payback. But his payback was he lost his life. So think about all these things. Think about the situation. Is there something or someone that's stealing your peace and your joy? I mean, this is when you got to take a moment and pause and know that God is working in your behalf. All times, not just sometimes. When you place your situations in God's hands with your prayers, Ask for what you need and leave it there. Leave it in God's hands. And my closing words for today are, if you keep listening to what he, she, and they say, you'll never be able to hear what God is saying. And until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Have a blessed and glorious new year. See you then. Thanks for joining me.